Always a good time to talk Michigan football. A great day to talk about Michigan football here today, post-draft, last Monday of April, getting ready to flip the calendar into May. And here's Jim Scarcelli, the former Wolverine, who joins us as always on this Monday. Scar, looking good. How are you?
Fired up, Danny. It's a great day, man. A lot of Wolverines drafted, first-round picks, late-round picks, free agents. Like Andy Reid said, man, you can't get enough Michigan guys, Denny. You know, that's all about the biggest thing I think in that statement is you're getting a team guy. You're getting a team guy, a tough guy, a responsible, reliable, smart team guy.
How come Andy Reid didn't draft any Wolverines then? No, I don't know.
Well, he, whatever, but he said it. And,
That's all right.
It is what it is, but sometimes they're available, but he's taken plenty.
Yeah, he has. You wonder why Harbaugh hadn't taken more, if they're the ultimate team guys. He had his opportunity. Well, besides the draft, there's a lot going on recruiting-wise. Michigan has picked a pair of commitments up over the weekend, and they're still kicking around the portal to see what they could do. The spring game was not this past Saturday, the Saturday before, but yesterday was the first time that the spring game was televised, so it might be top of mind for a lot of folks that watch the Maize and Blue spring game for the first time. But it is the NFL draft, Scar, is what everyone is talking about, and there were a bunch of Wolverines that ended up getting picked. And then there were some that did not get selected. What's your biggest takeaway when it comes to Michigan and the draft?
Well, Mason Graham is he doesn't have all of the measurables. He's right there. He's close. They probably like a little taller, maybe a little bit faster in some of the drills. But you know what? He's a damn player. He makes plays, athletic enough, tall enough. The guy just makes plays, man. He's a smart, great technique, Danny. There's you gotta play. You can teach guys technique. You can talk about it and go over it and over it. And Mason Graham just plays the double team as good as anybody. He comes off blocks. So I think it's a great pick for Cleveland. You're getting a guy that makes plays, man. Smart, tough kid. I'm happy for him. And so that was our first player off the board. And then Loveland went to Chicago. He went in front of the kid from, I think the world of the kid from Penn State, the tight end from Penn State. He's a big, tough, athletic kid. What the hell's his name? Warren?
Ty Warren. Yeah,
he's good. But they thought, I've stood next to Loveland at practice, and he's a tall, athletic kid. He's a hell of an athlete. And it's like, he's a good blocker, but he's not Scooney. But they want these guys that are the hybrid guys that they can put out, split them out, block just enough, bring them into the line of scrimmage occasionally to block a little bit. And, Lions are going to have to deal with him, but he's a hell of an athlete, man. And I'm happy for him. We got him. He was like number 300. You look at these picks. Mason Graham was like barely in the top 300. Loveland was barely in the top 300, and then Kenny Grant was like 450 or something. That's called recruiting. That's called eye for talent. That's called development. That's on Jim Harbaugh's watch, and then hopefully Sharon will keep that up. But to find these guys and then develop them, you got to find them and you got to develop them. And Kenny Grant now, love him, love everything that he's done. He wasn't the most highly recruited guy, and Jim called him a gift from the football guy. You could tell right away, Danny. I've always said it as a coach. You could tell first day in practice, put the pads on, and Jim could tell right away when he talked about him. And so those were predictable. And I'm wondering, Denny. Again, you look at all these little things that these general managers and these head coaches evaluate. We heard all these things about Will Johnson. He was supposed to be a little higher, and you're wondering if sitting out 6 games hurt him. Did they look at that? I know he was injured. We can look at all the different but the general manager has to make a decision about that. How injured was he? To not play after half of the year. And I'm just throwing it out there. I know that these guys look at everything, man. So, but he did go in the second round, early in the second. He's going down there to Arizona, and wish him luck. But those are my takes on those four.
Yeah, I don't think the GMs look at the guys sitting out and getting ready for the NFL if that's what possibly, if you want to make a case that Will Johnson did. There's a litany of players from Bosa to the half dozen guys that got picked in the first round, including
Bosa sat out half the year.
I sat out more than that, 75% of the year. Sewell and Nico Collins, although Nico Collins was
COVID. Sewell was COVID.
Yeah, but that was still something like they didn't hold that against them when those guys could have been out there. They don't hold that sort of thing against the guys. Now, you get a red flag on your medical with something with a knee injury, thinking that you might not be able to play over 3 or 4 years. That's one of the ways that you slide. We saw a bunch of different ways to slide. One is a medical. That one we have seen play out over and over again. Then, you have Shedeur Sanders, his monumental slide. We've never had a bigger slide than Shedeur Sanders, so you get that kind of slide as well. And then there's the off the field situations where you have a guy like Mike Green, who was with Marshall, a edge, who the Lions, that was their number one need, and he didn't get picked till number 59. He's got 2 sexual assault accusations against him. But John Harbaugh, whether he's already dealing with the Deshaun Watson type situation with his kicker, and he signed off on it to go ahead and get that guy. So those are the ways you slide. But or you slide like Donovan Edwards, who slid completely out of the draft. And I'm surprised by that. Donovan Edwards ran well.
I'm not surprised. I didn't know. Go ahead.
I'll let you talk, Scar. Go ahead. I was just.
I actually had a bet with a guy, Denny, that I thought Mullings would get drafted before Donovan Edwards. That's all I'll say about that. I did win my bet. Go ahead. I'm sorry for cutting you off.
I'm surprised that there were 24, 25 guys that were picked in front of him. I'm not saying that he's a first-round pick or second-round pick, maybe even a third-round pick, but I don't, and the thing is, I looked over all those guys. There was a few, and, Scatterbo didn't get picked to the 4th round. I liked him. So beauty's in the eye of the beholder. I think, if anything, I believe that Donovan Edwards, they say a long NFL career, I think that he'll show people that he deserved to get picked. Somewhere in the draft, not late in the draft. I think that he'll be able to show that with his production out on the field. That, the Jets wouldn't have been the spot that I would have picked for him, but I don't know what went into that for him. But good luck to him. What do you say, Scar? You say all that, well, outside the 300, and that's development. He was a top-ranked guy. Michigan won a national championship with him. He was productive as hell. When they needed him in big games, he showed up. He played with one arm, all of these things, and yet he slid out of the draft. What do you say to a running back that's like, what happened with the one-arm bandit? Why did he fall completely out of the draft? What do you say to that?
Did you hear running back analysts talk about him, running back coaches or head coaches or general manager?
No, I watched him for 4 years.
I understand that, but I would want to talk to and listen to a pro NFL running back coach, a pro head coach, or a general manager say, what do you think of Donovan Edwards? Not one of them guys on those panels that are that kind of, I'm just going to keep it real. It irritates me that they don't have a former general manager on that ESPN panel. You got all these guys.
They have a former general manager up there all the time in Tannenbaum, and there's a lot of people that's like, well, that guy got fired. Why do they have him? So
whatever. Put somebody up there that had to make those decisions and pull a trigger and really analyze.
Tannenbaum is up there. He's part of the draft coverage. It just depends.
I used to like when Gruden was up there and some of those guys that had to make those decisions and had to make, pick players and put players in games. I think, look, Donovan has to be in the right coaching staff, the right system for what they want. I don't know. I don't know what the heck, Denny.
I think I know. I think by watching him, what you look at, if you're going to have a knock, and it's what Michigan fans said about him all along, is that he went down too easy, that he wasn't able to break that first tackle, that he was a one-cut guy, that if you gave him daylight, he could take it home, but he's not going to break any tackles, and, he wasn't able to, you got to make that first guy miss. And I think
just answered it, Denny. You just answered it. You sounded you were right on. Okay, you got to. If I'm looking for a running back, I want number one. You better secure the damn football. You better pass protect. Okay, hopefully you can run block, but you better make a guy miss or you better run him over. If I'm giving you the football, make like Corum. He might not have been the best receiver out of the backfield, but Corum will make you miss or he'll run you over. And he's going to secure the damn football. That's what I want from my guy. And you can ask yourself, did Donovan Edwards do that? Did he make guys miss? Did he run guys over? That's why I won my bet with Mullings, because I said Mullings will go before him. But anyway, good luck to him. He's a great kid, Denny. He's a great kid. You can't always get it right. But let's talk about Josiah Stewart. I wanted the Lions to pick up Josiah Stewart.
Me
they
too.
talk about needing an edge guy. I'm big on Josiah Stewart. Could be, he could be he comes off the edge, man. He beats big dudes. He went third round, so we're fired up for him. And then we had who was between him and Mullings?
Maybe Hinton.
No, Hinton was late to Philly. Philly took Hinton. You look at Philly, Danny. If I'm a general manager or a head coach in the NFL, and I'm building my team, I'm building my program, and I'm saying, what do I got to do to win a Super Bowl? I'm putting on the Philadelphia Eagle film. I'm saying, how do we beat these guys? What does Philadelphia do? They have the biggest, baddest, toughest defensive football team. Their front seven is massive, is huge.
Yep.
That's the way they've drafted. That's what they believe in. You look at their offensive line. That's what they've drafted. That's what they believe in. We're going to have the biggest, baddest, most physical dudes on both sides of the ball. I think, Michigan is kind of recruiting the same way. It's what you want to do. You want to have the biggest, best athletes. They go and get that Jordan. We saw that kid at Georgia, so many Georgia guys. But, that's and that's why I liked what the Lions were doing, taking their first two picks. It's like, how do I beat Philly? How do I beat Philly up front on both sides of the ball? You better have 6'6", 330 to match with what they're bringing. So yeah, Josiah, I'm big on him. And then Donovan was a free agent, and Page was a free agent. I was a free agent, Denny. Anything can happen, man. You get with the right team, anything can happen.
Yeah, free agents make it. I go back. I remember James Hall made it with the Lions. He was a good free agent. There's plenty of. Doesn't mean your NFL career is over. You can get in there and you can make a team. You might have to get on a scout team, whatever. But it might be a longer.
And that's another thing too, Danny, that I have to mention. That's why I think Mullings is going to have a shot, man. Because these guys, when you're that late roster guy, they're going to look at Mullings and say, okay, Mullings could play fullback. We could put him in and he'll block a damn linebacker. We could give him the ball. He'll, as a backup running back, but he'll cover punts. He'll cover kicks. He'll be on my punt team. He'll be on my punt return team. He'll be on my kickoff team. And you ask yourself, can Donovan Edwards do all that stuff? I mean, if you're really going to make a comparison as to why a guy didn't get drafted, those are decisions that those guys have to make,
Yeah, well, and I look at Tennessee's running back room, Pollard and the other guy that was there. He's more of a diminutive back, and we know what you're bringing to the table if you're Khalil Mullings. He's he runs like a runs like a fullback, and so that's why he's where he's at. How about, you mentioned the Lions. I want to hear your thoughts on them. I'm also Shedeur Sanders. We got to ask you about him and his drop. I would also say, the Donovan Edwards not getting drafted, that surprised me. Quinn Ewers lasting to the 7th round, that surprises me as well. First round, okay. Second round, all right. But somewhere between the third and fourth and fifth round for Quinn Ewers. That's I'd almost put it.
Hey, Denny, picking these quarterbacks is I want accuracy, and I want the ability to escape. You want intelligence, you want toughness, but I was. How about the kid at Syracuse? The McCord. I watched him. I know I got a mutual friend that knows him. Blah blah blah. I've watched every that kid is good. He had a hell of a year at Syracuse. He single-handedly gave him a decent year. He left Ohio State, but I thought he might get drafted higher. He ended up going drafted late. And then the kid at Texas, all he did was come to Ann Arbor and make zero mistakes. But he's not the fastest kid. That's why it's gotta be the athletic ability that the coaches are putting a bigger emphasis on, because he is a smart, laser beam accurate kid. Kyle McCord, accurate player. So let's talk about Shedeur. I'm gonna throw some stuff out there.
Yeah, I can't wait. This is what I've been waiting.
I really wish they would have had. Again, I get back to that general manager or former coach that would give an honest evaluation, because you had all these guys beating around the bush on that panel talking about them, giving different reasons. I'm going to say this: as a high school coach, I have kids that I don't get to pick who their parents are when I'm, if a kid comes out for football. You follow me? I've had great parents that don't say anything. They're just, how can I help? And then every now and then you get someone that is a problem. Okay, but it is what it is. You deal with it. Not amazing. I didn't have many problems with parents, hardly at all, but you do occasionally have one. I can't pick. I have no choice in that. I'm a high school coach. I get whoever comes up and shows up for practice. Blah blah blah. Okay, college coaches, they got a choice. Okay, when Bo came to my room, to my house to recruit me, and all them other college coaches that came to have dinner with mom and dad, they were evaluating mom and dad just as much as they were evaluating me. You understand? They're sizing me up, but they're also sizing up my parents to get a feel for a lot of things as to what kind of kid I am. How was he? Blah blah blah. Okay, pro coaches have the same option too. Okay, and looking at everything around this kid, everything around the kid. And I know Mel went on there and he was pounding the table that, who his dad is irrelevant. That might be true. That might be true. If you ask the question, is Deion Sanders being your dad, is it a plus? Is it a negative? Or is it a neutral non-issue with evaluating Shedeur Sanders? Now, the answer to that question, I don't know the answer to that question. But general managers have to figure out the answer to that question. You know what I mean? Those are the guys that are going to take him in an early round. Is his dad being Deion Sanders a plus, minus, or non-factor? You would hope it's a non-factor. It might be a non-factor. It might be a plus. It might be a negative. I don't know the answer. But those guys have to make that decision. And none of them guys on that panel could address it. Mel said it's a non-factor. I don't know if it's a factor.
I would disagree with Mel, and I think you can after the way that you see how he's fallen, you can say that it worked against him. When Primetime was getting drafted himself, he was outlandish and he was talking a lot of trash, but he was a corner, and you could get away with that if you're a corner. You can get away with that when you're a wide receiver. You can't really get away with that when you're a quarterback. And the thing about Deion is that he coached Shedeur in college at both places, and he was his coach when he was in high school. So those things matter. And when Deion comes on and they asked him about it, or the one quote was that there were a couple places that he wasn't even going to let him go to. Like I didn't hear anybody ever say that, any kind of coach. So automatically, and he ends up going to one of those places, by the way. The Browns are the worst organization in all of sports, and they'd already taken a quarterback, and their quarterback room's a mess. So he landed in the spot that Deion said that he wouldn't allow him even to go. So there was an irony there. So yeah, you can rub guys the wrong way. Clearly, Shedeur Sanders rubbed these guys the wrong way. And that's why, he ended up
like if you're, Denny, listen, I've seen it 100 times going through the recruiting process with players, if how much they will overlook depends how good you are.
That's true.
You know what I mean?
No question. That's like that. It's like that, and like that in. Usually, I don't like to compare business and sports, but it's like that in business.
Okay, so I've seen it 100 times. Guys recruiting kids or this, that, or whatever. Okay, so when you look at Quinn Ewers, 7th round, and McCord, whatever the hell round he went in, and it's like there's a lot of really good players out there too. And are you that much better than these guys? That's what those coaches have to decide. But let me just say this too. Jim and Sharon coached Chris Hinton's kids. Hinton was an All-American, a 15-year pro. You know who I'm talking about, right? At Northwestern?
Sure.
I played against his old man. Okay. His dad was a stud, great player, college, and he had a great NFL career. Now, if you ask that question, if I'm recruiting Chris Hinton or the other one, what's his name? The other Hinton brother. Miles and Chris. I'm sorry. He had 2 kids play at Michigan, Miles and Chris. Now, if I'm evaluating the Hinton brothers who played at Michigan and I'm a general manager, is the fact that their dad is Chris Hinton a plus, minus, or neutral? How do you think those general managers are looking at answering that question compared to answering that question if Deion Sanders is your dad? You follow me?
Yeah.
So that's why those guys have to make those decisions. Here's a statement from Courtney Harper. Sanders is 6'1", average arm, lack mobility, holds the ball, NFL draft off potential and upside. Many QBs fall. Is his measurables better than McCord? Yeah, the measurables, when I talk about measurables with like defensive lineman, offensive lineman, it's usually like the height, the weight, the speed, the athletic ability. Yeah, he looks like he's more athletic than McCord, that's for sure. Evaluating arm accuracy, I'd have to look at all the film with like those guys look at every dang film, every throw, but yes, he's definitely more athletic, but McCord's a decent athletic kid. But I think McCord went in the 6th round, 5th round, probably the same round, but yeah, and then I'm not in the other thing is we're not in that meeting room where you put the kid on the chalkboard, on the dry board, and you start rifling questions. I'm not watching them. Those guys are at practice. They're seeing everything. How does he interact with his teammates? They're getting all that stuff, and they're just adding it all together to make their decision. So
here's what I would bet, Scar. I would bet that if Shedeur Sanders last year talked like Tom Brady, there's Tom Brady, when you talk about the team and what you want from a quarterback and what you want them to say, Tom Brady says everything perfectly. He still does, even as a pro.
Let me stop you right there, Denny. Let me stop you right there. Why do you think that is?
Well, because that's how he operates. He's a team guy.
You think he just came out of the grave and he just understood how to talk with that mentality? You don't think Michigan has anything to do with his mindset?
No, I think Michigan's probably got a lot to do with it.
It has a hell of a lot to do with his mindset. It's how he was raised. He spent 5 years there. That's the foundation. I mean, look, he come from a good family, and his old man was but I guarantee you a lot of his foundation is Lloyd Carr, team, Michigan, that was pounded into that dude for 5 years at Michigan. I mean, I'm sure Belichick in the way he ran things too, but go ahead.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And if I would bet that if Shedeur Sanders all year long told his dad, hey, get away, we're not going to have, but he couldn't have done that. He's Shedeur and Deion are kind of like the same guy. But if he would have talked a different way, I think he would have been drafted in the first 2 rounds. Now, you hit on something that I think it's what happens a lot of times when we're fans or the media or anything else. You get a list of, it's like when Dusty May was hired by Michigan, I had a list of about a half dozen coaches. You're like, well, who do you think they would hire? that's when you have to sit down. If I'm bringing you in to be the face of the franchise, the quarterback, I really need to connect with you. I want a guy that's going to talk like Tom Brady, who's going to be the perfect team guy. And if it's going to be Dusty May, I'm going to have to have a connection with him. I'm going to have to get out of that meeting. Sometimes, in the first minute, but after an hour, you walk out of there, you say, this is our guy. How many times do I hear recruits when they come in, they say they just felt really comfortable? You do that a lot. I've actually never been in the position where I was hiring someone like that, but that's what those GMs are looking for. They really need to have a connection. And we heard enough of the stories about sour interviews or headphones, or we've seen enough of the clips where Shedeur was talking about, I'm going to have the key to the city, where he just rubbed everyone the wrong way. Now, it's too late, and he's gone to the worst organization that he could possibly go to. So it's not over for him, but I've never seen anything like this. It was amazing. We'll never forget the 2025 drop of Shedeur Sanders.
Yeah, well, we'll see how he does. He's going to have a chance. It's odd that there's two quarterbacks there, but when I think about Dillon Gabriel, I think about those two quarterbacks, and then you're trying to compare. I've seen them all play many times. Dillon Gabriel came to Ann Arbor, made zero mistakes. Okay, won 13 straight games, zero mistakes against Michigan. Laser beam accurate, decent athlete. The kid from Texas came to Ann Arbor, laser beam accurate, zero mistakes, not very mobile. McCord, I watched him at Syracuse, single-handedly gave that guy a winning season. Accurate, so you look, and then you look at Shedeur, you look at those four guys. You say, good luck making a decision there, man. Good luck making a decision with those four players. Okay, so I don't see, Jalen Milroe where did he go, third round, Seattle? Jalen Milroe is special, man. He's special. And you know what else is special about him, Denny? You talk to that kid. I think they see great attitude. They see Saban. They see, where do you want me, coach? You want me to run this linebacker over? I'll do it for you. You know what I mean? They see great athlete, and they see team guy, soldier. And the kid, the number one pick, he must come off as a real team guy too. And he's just a damn good football player, accurate, bowl. The kid does everything. But when I talk about those other four guys, it's how the hell you make. And again, we don't have all the inside information to go through a interview that the coaches have with those players.
I'm with you. Let's move it back to Michigan. Unless you want to say you got the Lions. You got anything else in the draft that you wanted to say?
No. Yeah, what else? So we got the kid. Denny, what's good about the transfer, the NI, some of this stuff? The Lions picked up a kid who played at Unity Christian, Hudsonville. Okay, and in the ease of the ability to transfer. So the kid started out at Hillsdale, and then he played well. He wasn't a highly recruited kid. And then he went to Arkansas and he played well. He did some good things. So he went early with the Lions, big, tall receiver. Anyway, I think some of the stuff with where maybe 10 years ago, the kid probably wouldn't have transferred to really get the development of playing in the SEC. So there's some good stuff there with that.
Brad Holmes, he gets a long leash. And, you mentioned how, he was building the trenches. So an interior defensive lineman, an interior offensive lineman, he moved up into the second round. But the Isaac TeSlaa selection in the third round is, I'll put the stamp on in the end. That's Brad Holmes. And I think he's been the best general manager since he started that I've ever seen, not just for the Lions, just for the best. So, he gets a pass. I've looked at some of his other moves that I thought were curious, but moving up and giving up the amount of picks for a third round, for a third wide receiver in the third round in this TeSlaa, he overpaid and it looks like a reach. But then I'll put the stamp on that it was Brad Holmes. I didn't like that pick.
Yeah, he said. I tell you what, though, what he said about the kid, people have to understand. This kid is he talked about his desire to block. That's what Brad Holmes talked about with this kid. And he said he pissed off by the end of the week. He had all the defensive backs pissed off because he was, just blocking them. So that's what Brad Holmes said about the kid. Because you think about it, how many times are you going to throw the ball to you as a receiver? 2-3 times a game if it's a guy like him. but you put him in the game, he's got to block. He's got to be a prick, and you got to block people and be ready, willing, and able to do it. But again, I guess I'm gonna close on this with the draft. Don't underestimate the correlation between team guys, Michigan guys, Andy Reid wants, and what these NFL guys want.
Yeah, I would put an exclamation point on that. The edge that the Lions got in the 6th round from, where was he, from Boise, Ahmed Hassan Need. And the guy was crying and said he would die for the Lions. So, I mean, that's the kind
Let me also say this about, listen, I like listening to Mel. I like listening when he gives me statistics, when he tells me what coaches said about a guy, what general managers say about a guy. I like when he gives me information that other people have fed to him. Okay, but I'm not interested in him, pounding the table in his opinion. If Mel was so smart, an NFL team would have hired him 20 years ago. So that's my take on Mel Kiper. That if he was so damn smart, an NFL team would have hired him because he thinks he's the guru of evaluating talent. He yells at all these other guys that don't know what the hell they're doing. So that's my take on that. Just throw that out there.
All right, good way to end it up right there. I think a lot of people agree with you in where it was at.
Danny, how about some of these guys that we had some Michigan guys? I said it when I went to the spring game. I'm watching Bennett out there still playing with the edge players. I'm like, I couldn't believe they brought him back. Bennett, number 52 for Michigan. Bennett. Yeah, and sure enough, man, he jumped in the portal, right after the scrimmage. So all right, the punters. That's his former teammate. How do you say it, Denny? Tesla from Hudsonville. They make the ice cream over there, and they got good football over there too, man. I know about Hudsonville. Ice cream and good high school football. So
maybe he should change his name to Tesla. I think that's what everybody wants to call him.
Anyway, Bennett is in the portal. I did not understand why they brought the kid back, to be honest with you. So now he's going to get a late. He's, I don't know if he's going to graduate and just be done, but he's in the portal. He's going to try to play again. And there were a couple other names in the portal. Danny, I want to follow up on something. I read every question and comment, and I like the ones where people disagree with me. I'm good with that. My feelings aren't hurt. So there was a statement last week that I kind of simplified things that the defense has an advantage in a scrimmage going against the offense, and it's really, I think it applies to any team in football. Your own team. So in a spring game, Michigan's defense has an advantage. They know the plays. They know how they're run. They know how they block them. But what I did not elaborate on enough that you can't see from film, there was a relation to Connor Stallions and knowing the play. But you don't know what play they're going to run. It might be run or pass, but you don't know which play they're going to run. Okay, or exactly how they're going to block it. When you go against your team, there's little things you can't see on film, Danny. It's like you watch film all week of a player, and you can't tell how low he's coming off the ball. You follow me? His technique. You think you can tell. You don't know until you line up. So that's one thing. You look at splits. Line splits tell you a lot. You're looking at, you get a feel for, you look at it on film, you can't always tell. But when you get lined up and you look at the splits, you get a feel for things. What do the splits mean? Wide splits, tight splits. They mean something. It all matters if you're playing defense. What do the splits tell you? You figure out those things with your team because you see them so much. Okay. And then the communication. I can't tell the damn communicate. I can't hear when I get a scouting report, I don't know how the offensive line is communicating, what their calls are, how they're going to block a certain, what the calls mean. Obviously, they have dummy calls. Offensive linemen will have calls to mean we're going to block it this way. They'll have dummy calls to screw with the defense. I understand that. But you scrimmage against your team enough, there's a lot of little things that you get to figure out that you can't see on film. You won't know through a scouting report. So I wanted to respond to that statement that kind of made it sound like I just like, oh, thanks for the tip. You know what the hell they run. Well, you don't know which damn play they run. You know how they're going to block it more so than other teams. But there's a lot of little things that you don't know from a scouting report or from looking at film. And I could probably go on and on to answer this question, but I do appreciate the subtle dig.
Well, I appreciate the honesty. I like that you go back and look at all the questions. I try to do that as well. Actually, I try to look at them all as they're coming through.
And also, I want to say this too. When you play defense, if we're playing Purdue and they run a play in a formation, they run a play and a formation that our offense does not run. So they run a formation we've never seen, and they run a play. They block it differently than our offense runs it. So that week in practice, I might see that play 5 times out of that formation. You follow me?
Yes.
Okay. Opposed to lining up against our offense, I will see a formation in a play 500 times. You understand the difference? So they're seeing a play 5 times from an opponent that you're going to see in the week in practice, opposed to seeing your own team who pound the hell out of the same plays all the time, and you see it, and it's called play recognition is what defensive coaches refer to it as. Play recognition. You understand? That you see it so many times, and it's you get comfortable with it. That's what you try to do as a defensive coach, is you try to give your team as many looks as possible as the plays you're going to see against a certain team.
I like that. That's good information. They played the spring game for the first time on TV yesterday, and there were 3 or 4 throws that I wanted to see from Underwood that I just wasn't sure if it was the defensive back that made a good play, if it was the wide receiver that dropped it, if it was if Underwood could have made a better throw. And out of all of the throws that I went through that I wanted to see, it came out where Underwood actually looked pretty good on all of them. On the first series, he threw one out to the flat to Andrew Marsh that I thought could have nearly been picked by one of the Metcalf brothers. But it turns out that Underwood, he threw it where he had to. I think the defensive back may have ended up making the play, but it also looked like Marsh could have made the catch. So I give it to Underwood. I don't think that was a bad throw. The other one is when they got down to the goal line and he threw a back shoulder. I think it was to Marsh over on the left side. They ended up calling a pass interference. That was a good throw by Underwood. He came back and then threw a fade to Browder, and I thought that the defensive back got his hand in there, but no, Browder just dropped it. I mean, he had both of his hands, and then there was another. It was almost a 40-yard pass at the end of the third quarter down the sideline. I mean, it's an NFL throw when you're trying to fit it into this tight window. And I thought, well, maybe it wasn't the greatest throw. Maybe the defensive back. No, Browder dropped that one too. And look, Browder, he's 6'5". He can go up. They talked about him high pointing. He was just in for spring as a freshman. Maybe McCauley makes those catches, but that's the difference. I mean, he's got to make those kind of catches. It doesn't mean that Browder sucks or he's got hands of stone or, they need to go out and make sure they get somebody else. But he did have a few opportunities there that Underwood put the ball right on him. And if you're, I'd say, a top tier wide receiver, we're talking about a true freshman that's in for spring. But, those were a couple balls looking back on that I wondered about with Underwood, and they were mostly on the money. They weren't perfect, but I look back and those passes were better than I thought.
Yeah, we'll get the film up hopefully and have it next week. And yeah, Denny, I was really impressed with the balls that were, tight windows. He threw them where only his guy could get to them. And as far as the dropping a ball, that's what's great about having a spring game with 50,000 people there. The kid, he had to get acclimated to the pressure, and maybe he choked a little bit. That's fine. So who's winning the wing eating contest? Scar or the Incredible Hulk? Man, I can't hang like I used to, but I can still do okay, man. In the eating competitions.
It wasn't. It was more of a beer drinking competition this past Thursday for that Piston game, but there were also hot wings involved, and there were I don't know, 30 hot wings, habanero, and then a lot of cold beer going on. I think I can hang. I think I can hang if those are the two things. I know I'm adding a variable there.
Okay, Danny, I got a couple other things. One last thing about the NFL draft, I think is a bunch of BS.
Ooh, all right.
You see some of these guys in the media give a draft ranking.
Yep.
Really? You think these? I don't buy none of that for about 4 years. Let's evaluate them in 4 years. So I think that's just a bunch of BS. That's my take on that.
Well, my take on that is that here's the thing, Scar. If you were brought in somewhere to work, they would say, "Hey, Scar, we want your grade," and you would say, "It doesn't flipping matter until 4 years." They go, "We don't care. People don't care."
Well, I get it. Well, again,
they want grades. They want to know what you thought.
Okay,
they want to know immediately. But you can always tell people, and I think we all know that. It's kind of like recruiting. Somebody's got this guy is a 4-star, the other guy's got him a 5-star. People are arguing back and forth, and then after you say, "Well, let's see what happens in 4 years." Well, I don't know. Donovan Edwards was damn near a 5-star and he didn't get drafted. Should we be, gnashing our teeth and everything about that and what went on or what?
Man. I'm just throwing it out there that it's really hard to pick, and I just throwing it out there. Smigiel, Denny.
Okay.
I looked at the big quarterback. Do you look at his film?
I watched a couple minutes of his film. Yeah, not much.
I mean, he's a big kid. He looks, a big, tall kid. He's got a little different release. He looked pretty darn accurate. Again, it's a highlight film. I wish I could see a whole film. I'd like to see him get sacked or or some of that stuff. I had coaches that didn't want highlight films when I was coaching. They want to see the nasty stuff too.
Sure.
But anyway, they got him as a 5-star. I watched his sophomore highlight film, which was pretty darn impressive. So it's just interesting, Denny. It's really interesting that you got kids that are not afraid to come in behind another, 5-star top quarterback in the country. So it's an interesting deal that this kid says, "Bring it, man. I'm coming, Bryce. I'm going to compete." And but it's a great pickup. What I saw was a big kid, accurate arm, enough athletic ability. Not JJ, but enough to be a problem. And we obviously like him. He's athletic enough. He could be like a Will Howard in terms of athleticism. He looked like he had some toughness. So anyway, that's a great thing that you can go out and get another 5-star kid.
Yeah, I thought, when you talk about his throwing mechanics and everything else, he was big, and you could see that he's got the arm talent where he can really let it fly. I like that, and his stature from there. In terms of these guys that are 5-stars, like following up somebody with Bryce Underwood, I see the path. Even though there's some guys that might want to come in with like Underwood, who's 17 years old and want to play immediately. This is mostly just this last, in these last 5 years. It's also not a bad idea to go to a program you feel comfortable with. You don't have the pressure to be a starter when you're 18 years old. You got a guy like Underwood who could be the number 1 pick, at least Michigan fans, certainly a first-round pick. And you could redshirt your freshman year. That you could be a redshirt freshman. He could actually, as a redshirt sophomore, be starting for Michigan if Underwood goes pro after his.
Denny, when I was getting recruited, I was more. I get that. But if Underwood works out and he's good and it all plays out good, you could be sitting the bench for three years.
2. Yeah, if you use your red shirt.
So anyway, I get that, but not every recruit looks at it like that. And he obviously is not afraid. He likes what he saw in Ann Arbor. And, that's a great thing that we can just keep breaking, because that's what Ohio State's been doing. Ohio State will have, they'll bring 2 5-stars in the same year.
Well, that's a little, to me, that's crazy. I don't know about crazy, but you could make an argument when you look at the top 10 quarterbacks in each class over the last 5 years. There's only a few that stick with their original team. There's so much movement. There's more movement than there are guys staying with the same team when you come down to the top 10 quarterbacks. And that's what Smigiel is. So it's more likely he'll, when you bring in a guy like this, regardless of class or whatever, that, he's going to be moving on. So you get him wherever you can like that. It's good news for Michigan. They follow up. That was an elite recruiting class that they had last year. They'll be able to get a 5-star. It shows you that they're still, this thing is still going. They got it, rolling. I don't know what, if Jolin was like, yeah, I'm in on the quarterbacks, whatever they want. But you get a quarterback early, then they can be the point person for the class. We've all seen that, how it plays out. So that's good. I don't know what kind of recruiter Smigiel is, but he can be the West Coast bureau chief for Michigan out there and work on those wide receivers, while he can. So I see it nothing but good news for Michigan with the commitment of getting Smigiel.
And then we picked up a 3-star commitment kid named Tarek Berry, 6'2", 230.
Boney.
Yeah, Boney. And I think it was somebody on our website thought he reminded him of Josiah Stewart. And he's a raw. I look at his film. I looked at the kid's film. He's 6'2", he's 230. He's a raw, rugged, fast, athletic kid. They got him as a 3-star, but he's been coached. He's been coached pretty good. He uses his hands, and you could make the argument that he could be, with great coaching and a couple years of work, a Josiah Stewart type kid. So Trevor, go ahead. You want to read that, Denny?
Well, you got Trevor McHugh, who was doing a great job on his podcast last night, and is like every other minute on the Maize and Blue Review. He's joining us here. He says the plan for Smigiel could be to take over in 28 as a redshirt sophomore with 2 years left, while Bryce is off to the NFL after 3 years. That doesn't sound like a bad plan to me if I'm in the Smigiel camp or the Michigan camp or the Underwood camp. Whatever camp you're in, I like it.
Yeah, and Denny, you can, look, the way the predetermined quarterback run is evolving as a mandatory part of your offense. It ain't gonna hurt to have three good ones there that can run it, throw it, and you can win with. Keegan is not convinced that Boney will stay at edge. I tell you, when I look at him, when you look at his physique and what he's about, I mean, I don't think he's an inside linebacker. He looks edge all day long to me. But he's, the only thing would be, if you say, okay, where are you going to put him? On the inside, he's going to have to gain about, 80 pounds. Can he do that? That's, can he be a 300-pound kid and play in there like Mason Graham, that type of kid? Because if you're going to play inside, you can't go in there at 260, 270. Jenkins was, he could be like a Chris Jenkins, maybe. Jenkins was, I think, maybe 230 when he came in as a freshman, and he got up to 300 pounds. So yeah, he could. You might make a good point there, but when you look at him right now, he looks like he could be a good edge player with a couple years working under Wink. So that's a good pickup for us.
Just say it, Scar. He looks a little bony. For a guy, to me, just watching the spring game, and then I was watching it again yesterday. I watched 3 quarters plus. I think that Nathaniel Owasso Boateng, who wears number 12 for Michigan, he looks more like a safety to me than a linebacker. But let's see, he's just in for spring too. And, who knows? He takes off his pads. Maybe he's ripped. And you having a big speedy linebacker. It's not like Devin Bush was, some, ripped, he looked like, to me, that he looked like it was a safety to me too. I said the same thing about Devin Bush when he was here.
Yeah, Danny, let him get in that training table and let him hang out with Coach Truss.
Yeah.
That's his name, right? Truss,
yeah.
Let him hang out with Truss for about 8 months or a year and get in that training table. I've been to their training table. They eat pretty damn good, a little better than when I was there. Bo hired some old former military guy to ran our training. It was good food. I ain't complaining about the food. I think, but I see what they eat now. They're eating good, man. They got food everywhere they look. So if you're trying to gain weight, there's food in every direction.
I like it. All right. Where else are we at? We got some questions. We've been through the draft. We've hit on the spring game, talked about the Lions, and then recruiting with Boney and Smigiel. I think that kind of covers it all and what's happening here. Anything else that you have there on your list that you want?
Hardaway got this. Pistons and Hardaway got the shaft. That should have been a call, but it is what it is. Denny, hopefully I'll have film next week, and we'll look at the film and we'll break it down and we'll slowly go over some things and try to evaluate the spring game.
Yeah, you're right. It was Tim Hardaway Jr. who got fouled there, and he had played really well up to that point. He could, and he's going to give he's going to give the Pistons the win there, being able to walk up to the line and knock a few free throws down. So that's too bad that he wasn't able to get that call. And then, the NBA almost rubs your face in a scar. Like, a half hour later, they're like, oh yeah, it should have been a call. Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Maybe in the future, it's not doing any good now, but you'll get a challenge where you could challenge. It would have been maybe the Pistons who blew their challenge in the first 5 minutes of the game. If they would have challenged it, would they have been able to get that call?
Yeah. But a lot of good stuff, a lot of happy for these Wolverines, and guys are going to get opportunities, free agents. You're going to go out and, Danny, I was a free agent, and there's mini camps. So there'll be a mini camp within a couple weeks, and there'll be a bunch of dudes, free agents, guys that they brought in that have played at other places. There'll be a bunch of dudes, and you're going to have to survive that first training. There's guys that ain't going to get invited back after the first mini camp, and then you'll have another mini camp about 6 weeks after that. And then there'll be a whole bunch of dudes that'll come in. So you got to just to get the training camp is a challenge. So these guys are going to go through it. But I firmly believe going through Michigan, these guys have a little bit of an edge, enduring and finding a way to make a team.
I only have one more question for you, Scar. What grade would you give Brad Holmes and the Lions on their draft?
I think he's looking at Philly because I like the physicality up front, Danny. I do. I give it a grade because
I was just trying to be funny.
I know. I hear you. Some of them dudes, though, I get it. I like the idea. If you're going to win in the NFL, you better put the tape on of the Philadelphia Eagles. Say, how the hell do I beat those guys? Okay. Because it's like Michigan looking at how do I beat Ohio State? Well, we better recruit to beat Ohio State. We better recruit to win a Big Ten championship, because you can't just pull stuff out of your ass.
Yeah, I thought when Harbaugh went to the Chargers, he was looking and saying, "Hey, how do I beat Patrick Mahomes?"
That's right.
You got to play him twice. You better think about that.
Yeah, you got to find it. You better work your system to whatever. To beat the best teams. But it's all good, Denny. Go blue.
There he is. Scar, I'm going to do it anyways. I give him an A for his performance today.